welcome back to Magic and the Noise. Thank you for being here. Today we have very special guests joining us. We have Debra Lynn Katz and Michelle Freed. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
And so just so for the audience, Debra Katz is the president of ARVA. She's also the founder of the International School of Clairvoyance, and she's a psychic. So we have some questions for her about this. And Michelle Freed is a hypnotherapist. She's also a remote viewer, and she's an instructor specializing in CRV, controlled remote viewing. And she also does Butterfly Effect Center remote viewing group. So we'll have to ask her about that a little bit as well. Michelle has worked with Art Bell, who is a familiar character, I think, for most remote viewers. He was part of the Post AM show, and she's now working with Jimmy Church, the Fade to Black. And so let's start with you, David. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great and very happy and excited to see Michelle and Debra here tonight. And since both of you have a talk show, the Psychic Chicks talk show, one of the things I thought I would start with out of curiosity is what are some of the psychic experiences, like even you, Sasha, me, everybody, like what kinds of psychic experiences have people have that they might want to share?
Well, gosh, how many hours or days or years do we have? Well, I'll just say I started out as a little kid having a lot of experiences because I have an identical twin sister, and we would oftentimes finish each other's sentences. We would know what the other was about to say, and if we weren't together, we would know what was happening with the other one. And at a young age, I realized that sometimes like I would be feeling fine and then suddenly like I would be feeling anxious or upset, and then she'd walk into the room and be like, oh, I'm so anxious, or oh, I'm so upset. And it started to make sense, and I realized at an early age that my emotions and feelings and even body sensations weren't always mine, that they were coming from somewhere else. And now, that's gotten to be a popular theme for many people, being empathic. But I wrote my first book in 2004 called You Are Psychic. And I really wanted people to understand that, this is a really important concept, that our feelings and sensations are not always our own. And today it seems like, it's the most popular knowledge or general knowledge.
That's really interesting and unique, right? Because most people don't have a twin. So for me, when I think about trying to imagine that experience, it's like, wow, that would be really interesting and exciting. What about you, Michelle?
So I think a lot of my personal ones are kind of connected to Debra. I'm not sure if everyone knows that we go back many years. We grew up together. So any influence in the psychic department would come from Debra and her sister. No, I call her Debra. I can't change. Like when she grew up, she decided to go with the professional name, and I just can't get through it. So no one else is to call her Debbie.
You can call me Debbie, because if you're going to choke or throw up, if you say Debra, we wouldn't want to make a mess all over.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, you're the best. So, but I remember when she approached me to take one of her classes, and I remember thinking that like psychic is only for people that are born with it. Like I just came from that kind of mainstream idea of what psychic is. And then after taking her classes and got to a point where, oh my gosh, I can't explain this away anymore. I can't justify, I can't find some reasonable explanation why I knew this or whatever. You get to a point where you just give up fighting. It's like I can't even hold resistance anymore. And so and then in retrospect, looking back through my life, then I realized, oh, a lot of things, mine kind of manifested in a different kind of way. I had this kind of knack for understanding people where it was almost as if I could become them so that I could have empathy and understand them. Like when my friends would come to me and they had a problem, in order to like counsel them as a friend, I was able to like get in them. And I thought everybody could do that. And so, but after taking Debbie's class and thinking about my past, I realized, oh, I guess I did do some things, but I just never really put it all together.
Yeah, I think we both really believe that everyone has psychic abilities and can sense the same things that we do. It's just everyone, so many people think that they're a closed system, and so they just think their thoughts are their thoughts, or they just have other reasons they attribute to why they know what's going on with other people.
Yeah, and what's interesting, because I have an experience that ties in both kind of in the categories that you guys are talking about. For me, I went to a town that was supposedly haunted, and I didn't know. I don't make an assumption it is or isn't. I just wanted to explore and see what the possibilities might be. And I went into it's Jerome, Arizona, is what it's called. And there's a hotel at the very top of the city, and it's built in the side of a mountain because it's an old mining town. And the hotel used to be the hospital for all the miners, right? All the injuries and stuff. And it's super haunted. And when I was in the bar, which was kind of the waiting area for people that would be admitted to the hospital, I got this like overwhelming kind of like I felt really nauseous. Like I was like, ooh, I think I'm getting the flu or something, right? I just like, but like instantly it just came on. And I kind of, part of me realized like, wait a minute, where is this coming from? Because I was like trying to find it, and I realized like it was coming from outside of me. And it was like this is like a signature of that particular town. After I worked with it for a while, I realized that town has this like kind of like stagnant, kind of trapped kind of energy, and it kind of does this sort of thing in the environment. It just kind of moves up and down, and it kind of spiked me. But like I realized in that moment, I was like, oh man, if I hadn't caught that, I bet I would have like said, oh, I'm getting sick, and just sort of went with it and made it happen, right? So for me, that was a very interesting learning experience.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I was once sitting next to a friend, and I was doing an exercise where I was just visualizing energy run up and down my back because I had some pain in my back. And as I was doing that, she was sitting next to me. And then she started to say that she had pain in her back and she could feel something moving back and forth. But she was like, oh no, maybe there's something wrong with me and I better give my doctor a call. And then I told her like what I had been doing and that I thought that she had sensed that. And I've had a lot of other experiences like that too, which shows me it's really easy for people to experience what other people are. But isn't that scary to think that like some of what we're dealing with, we are just attributing it to like, oh, we've got some health problem. And I really think that so many people, like they may be suffering from depression because they live with someone who's depressed, or suffering from pain because they live with someone who really does have a valid injury. And instead of just, a lot of times if you realize that you're just picking something up from the environment or someone else, just even that thought or that questioning, like, is this mine or is this someone else's or something else's? Usually it goes away. Like it's that easy. Sometimes you have to do a little bit more than that, but just that line of inquiry, which so many people don't know what to do.
Yeah, I remember you always saying like, I know this isn't from me. Or you ask a question, you'll say, I don't think this is mine. You say that. And then you also have an exercise in your class of calling back your energy, which I use that all the time. even like if I'm doing hypnosis with people or anything, I think it's important to kind of pull back your own energy and separate the negative part when you're so connected to someone and you don't do that, is that someone who shall remain nameless kind of listens in on conversations when I'm talking to my daughter, and then calls me up and says, "Hey, were you just talking to your daughter about what was it, lunches or I don't know, whatever?"
Well, she's referring to, that was another major psychic experience we had together, where one morning I woke up and I heard Michelle's voice talking, and it was talking, her voice sounded like she was literally in the room. Like, this is pretty unusual. You know, it's one thing to just kind of hear thoughts in your head telepathically, but I really thought it was like a radio was on, or as if she was on the phone, but the phone was hung up. And I heard her and her daughter talking about carpool issues,
right.
something about, you know, late for carpool or something. And it was definitely like her and her daughter talking. So I called her and I was like, are you and Kayla talking about carpool right now? And she was like, oh my God, how did you know that?
Yeah. Yeah. Have either of you ever had, like, when you wake up in the morning, or not even in the morning, but you hear somebody whisper your name so clear? Has that ever happened to you?
I haven't had that. I've had, it usually does happen around the waking period because I think you're in a certain kind of state where it's more inclined to happen. But I've heard like full-blown music that I've never heard before that's like super beautiful. And sometimes it will be stuff that I hear in the future that I'm hearing in the present kind of thing, but I don't realize it, like a precog sort of thing. Other times I think it may be from some other reality or something. I'm not really clear on that, but I haven't actually heard my name per se. What about you, Sasha?
So for me, it's caused embarrassment because sometimes if I'm talking to someone, I'll pick up information either that they're thinking about or is about them or their lives. And especially if I'm just trying to come up with an example off the cuff, and I'll say something, especially if I'm trying to compare something to something silly or something that I don't like or don't approve of, if I have to think of a TV show or a town or a type of interest, I'll say their hometown. I'll say their secret interest. I'll say their favorite TV show. It's always very socially awkward. So that's in terms of picking up other people's. But I do more transmitting, sending out. So in one instance in particular, I remember I was at a social event and I was extremely bored. I just didn't connect with the people that were around me. The conversation that I was trapped in was just not interesting to me. And I felt this urge of like, oh, there are these people that I would rather be with right now that I miss, friends from another city, an ex, and I just send out this kind of call of like, I wish you were here right now, or I wish I were with you, because that would be so much better than what I am. And it was such a feeling of desperation, when you are surrounded by people and you realize like, I do not fit in here at all. And you're so lonely by that reality. And the next morning I had a flurry of emails and texts from those people saying, oh, I had such a vivid dream about you last night, or, oh, I was thinking about you yesterday. Like, is everything okay? And so I think I do more of the projection. But one of the things that this makes me think of, especially what you were saying, Debra, about how sometimes we're picking up things from our environment, from other people. I think of this a lot when I think of the terrible things I think that are going on right now. The children that are suffering. We hear, especially with the whole Hollywood Diddy party thing, you hear all these horror stories. And I think all these people who are being damaged, that is impacting our consciousness. When I hear about, people that are being slaughtered in war, that's impacting our consciousness. And because David and I have talked about in our some of our conversations on our channel about visualization, about intention, and about when you're thinking about something really loudly, how remote viewers can easily pick up on that, the records, the data stream that gets etched in very deeply. And I think as well, if you're fantasizing about terrible things, that people are doing more and more because the online titillation entertainment industry is always trying to push the envelope to keep customers, and it's competitive. So then what started out as, oh, look at these lovely people kissing intimately, has become something so depraved and so violent or gruesome or shocking, just to compete with all the noise. And I think people are fantasizing about that, dreaming about that. What impact is that having on the collective consciousness? So those are kind of the things that I worry about a little bit. I think being able to counteract that, right? Putting positivity out there, but also maybe doing things to mitigate some of that, I think is something we should be thinking about as a community, maybe because we're more aware than others.
Yeah, I really worry about that a lot. I mean, just almost every movie has just so much killing in it, like purposeless, and just, I mean, maybe it's never purposeful, but just people doing terrible things to each other, and just the worst role models everywhere. Like how, whether it's direct or there's a subconscious aspect, or it just can't be good. It's like we're feeding garbage into the atmosphere, into the minds of everybody. And and then it's just, well, freedom of speech, or, if you say you want to restrict this stuff, you sound too conservative or whatever. But, why wouldn't we in any situation be looking at what are we doing here and what are we putting out? Like we should be looking at that. It shouldn't just be some free for all, because in any situation, if it's a free for all, and it's not the people that are doing this, like, why are they doing it? That's another question. Why does every movie have such incredible violence? Like, who's behind this?
Or the pairing of sexual imagery with disgusting horror imagery. I've seen that in, like, music videos are doing that a lot more now. They'll show women scantily clad being seductive, and then they'll show really disgusting, right? They keep pairing those two in consciousness. Sorry, Debra or Michelle. I mean, you were gonna say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, and this could be a wild concept, but I feel like these things that are out there are to show us contrast, and it gives us an opportunity to kind of resist that way and kind of set an example for ourselves, so that we're living this kind of life and people have a choice. Do they want to, like, lean into that, or lean into the positivity, or a brighter outlook on things?
Well, that's a good way of thinking of it, except it's just there. It seems like there's so much more. I mean, not through it depends what we're tuning into, right? Like, we're tuning into this show here, or other more enlightened shows that are designed to have that positivity. But the masses, or kids or whatever, they're being exposed to a lot of, it's just easier to find all of that than to find what we're doing here. And maybe that's, if we could do what we're doing here, but on more major TV networks, or there's just there is a lot more, like, that's the positive thing. But
I'm going to argue with you, because
go ahead.
I love you. Because I would say that let's just divide this up into negative and positive. So the negative, it doesn't have a lot of sticking power, where once somebody is moved by the positive, they will stay there. Once they can make that change into kind of a better outlook, that has more of, the hooks in you. It feels better. People that are kind of, there might be a lot in numbers, but it's just not as powerful. I feel like once people kind of move into the positive, that will keep you there.
And Well, I'd like to add to that, David. I know you were going to say something, but Michael in chat is saying emotional and attentional hygiene, I think, is very important for your own side tuning instrument. I agree, Michael. I think there's a responsibility on ourselves to make sure we're in a clean environment so that we're not exposing ourselves to things that are going to corrupt our consciousness too much, that we're able to put that positivity so that when the thoughts that we're injecting into the collective unconscious are maybe brighter, more positive, healthy thoughts. David?
Yeah, and just kind of on this topic matter, it was just all to me very interesting. You know, I had talked about being influenced negatively by the environment at that location without really being aware initially what was going on. But of course, if we look at there's studies where they've taken large numbers of meditators and their consciousness through meditation has supposedly, through stats, affected positively the environment by bringing down the crime in the local area to a significant degree where it can be seen. So this is sort of a positive push, a projection of energy or emotion or desire or thought, which, you know, on the one hand gets into things like remote influencing, which is that's up to the person. Like one person's good as another person's bad, you know, so you have to kind of be aware of that to a degree. But in terms of the idea of counteracting some of this stuff from a more positive perspective, there are opportunities, I guess, that may not necessarily be, people may not be aware of it on the surface.
Yes, and I think there are more people thinking the way we're thinking and talking about these things. I had psychic experiences spontaneously when I was a child, but then as I grew up, I was immersed in academia. And so because of that, I became a bit of a militant atheist and a skeptic. And in academia, skepticism and militant atheism is seen as the intellectually superior position. And so then I had to kind of undo all that damage in order to be where I am today and to be able to really fully access my psi abilities. And so I think that what I'm seeing in academia that gives me hope is that there's a little bit of this movement to more openness. And I wanted to ask you, Debra, about the IRVA's research unit, because this you're conducting research or you're helping, you know, discuss research through IRVA, which is for the audience, the International Remote Viewing Association, into psi. This may be hopefully meeting a standard that has more credibility with the scientific community. And before, I just want to put the caveat, I don't think we should be chasing after legitimacy in the eyes of academia or of the mainstream science establishment, because I don't think they should be the arbiters of truth. And so I always have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the idea of conducting research in a way that they find acceptable. Peer-reviewed research, when we know peer-reviewed research is actually really corrupt and biased and leads to a lot of stagnation. And so there's the replication crisis going on in the science community right now today, where all this study that we took as a given, we took on faith, it's true because science, peer-reviewed research has shown us this is true. And now it turns out it's not true. It can't be replicated. And so I do have that resistance to wanting legitimacy in the eyes of academic science. But at the same time, I think it's good to be doing better research in psi. And so I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about the IRVA's research unit and what you guys are doing and how it's going.
Yeah, sure. Well, we created it a few years ago because one of IRVA's mandates, well, there's three. There's to promote the history of remote viewing, the education of it, and research. And we recognize that there was a lot more we could be doing with research. And so we started off having our monthly creative team meetings, which is the first Sunday of every month at 2 p.m. and anyone's welcome to join us. And so we were really envisioning that we would bring people together, both like people brand new to research, and then, like you mentioned, formal academic researchers, and then also parapsychologists who fit somewhere in the middle there. And we wanted to both help more formal researchers who would benefit from the experience of remote viewers, because, sometimes formal researchers that they've been doing research for years and years, but when you start getting into remote viewing, there's so many nuances that they just don't understand. For example, I'm working with the research team right now, and one week they'll give targets to the viewers that are like of a wide, a location where the feedback photo, you could see the whole location. And then the next week, like this week's target was a close-up of Mother Teresa. And I was just like, we already know, like, informally, that when viewers are working on a project week to week, they have an expectation of what it's going to be like, and then they'll use certain methods to fit into that expectation. Like for a location, you're going to use the methods of imagining that you're going to the location and that you can look at things from different perspectives. You can go up, bird's eye view, look down, you can move something and touch it and go underneath. And so if you have like a close-up object that's not even a real object, or a close-up person, it's not that they'll always miss it. Like in our project, right now we have 20 viewers, and some people did get a close-up. They drew a close-up image of a woman, but then they had a whole bunch of data about the location, which there's no way to know if it's right or wrong because the feedback photo doesn't show it. So more experienced researchers would know, or if they listen to the remote viewers, they would know, like, you need to have a more homogeneous target pool. And there's lots of different things like that. There's like, I've had formal researchers where when I was a subject in their project, they gave me a target. And when they sent me the feedback photo, it was sitting on a messy desk and in a messy room, and right outside, they lived in Manhattan, and you could see like the whole Manhattan scene outside the window. And he had told me it was a location target, and it turned out to be a person's name and numbers. And I'm like, what? Like, are you guys trying to mess this up? I actually did like have the numbers in it, but it's just things like that. I don't think they were trying to mess things up. But so if we could bring those kinds of researchers into our meeting where they can run their project by us, and we could say, yeah, we like this, but have you thought of this? And then on the other hand, there's so many remote viewers who are doing really great work, but no one really knows about it. They're not really able to get their work out there. Or there's also, like, you constantly hear groups of remote viewers debating each other about things. Like some will say, oh, I'm good at tuning into people, and others will say, no, don't give me a photo that has a person in it. Or one person might say, yeah, it doesn't make a difference if I have a target that's chosen before I do the session or after. And some people think it does make a difference. Well, how are you going to find out the answer to these questions? The way you're going to find out is doing repeated trials and making sure they're all done in the same way, and making sure that there's not extraneous variables that could be pointed to as the explanation for what's going on. So doing things in a controlled manner is actually really helpful if you're trying to pin down understanding something very, very particular. And that's something that some researchers don't really understand. And so we're trying to bring people together so that we can have more research going on. And that actually is, IRVA just completed a research project where we surveyed viewers on whether or not they know when they're on target or when they have a correct piece of information in their session. Because there's some people, so some CRV teachers think that you can't know when you're correct or not. And when we put the survey out, some got upset with us saying we shouldn't be asking that because it might cause their viewers to get fixated on being correct instead of just focusing on the target. However, our findings were that something like 87% of, we surveyed 130 viewers, and 87% said sometimes they do know when they're on target or when they're correct or not. And we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't, done some kind of systematic inquiry into it, at least. So we're doing that. And then I'll just end this with, a group of us, we're all the board members on IRVA and also members of the IRVA research unit. We put together a collection of studies and applied for a Bial Foundation grant, and we got the grant. So we just got $60,000 to apply to 5 different studies. So there's a lot of other people outside of IRVA that also applied for psi or parapsychology related projects, and some related to remote viewing, and they also received grants. So I think over the next couple of years, I don't just think, I know, like, you're going to see a lot more remote viewing research coming out, not just because of IRVA, but across the board, there's really an explosion of interest in these topics.
Yeah, and that makes me wonder. I have a question about that, or what your thoughts are on it, because it's one of the things we were going to talk about a little bit later. But do you think that this effort that is happening more recently is in relationship to the declassification of UFO information that's coming out? Because there's a lot of references where they bring up remote viewing. I've seen them, some of these guys that are in the program that are coming out with declassified information, and they keep referencing remote viewing, like on Joe Rogan. It's like repeatedly, different people. And I'm like, oh, it seems like they're trying to get a message out, and maybe they're interested in, bringing this back out and studying this more in the open.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that, but Michelle, do you want to take a stab at that first?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I do think there's some relationship as they're looking at the UFO government programs. It is more on their radar, whether people research it and find out about remote viewing. But, remote viewing is becoming more popular, and it's kind of like what initiates what. People are more commercializing remote viewing, and remote viewing can be more easily commercialized, because you can do things like hire remote viewers, or you can train remote viewers, and you can have lots of media materials about it. Whereas with UFO stuff, you can do that too, but it's a little less easy to commercialize it. And, I think you have all these people who are so excited about UAPs, UFOs disclosure, but they also, some of them are out of jobs, or some of them need to make money. And it's like, how can I do what I'm passionate about and be involved with what I'm passionate about, but how is this going to bring in money? So I think there's some people that are branching into remote viewing because of that. The other thing, that's a little pessimistic. The other thing is that so many people who have encounters with UAPs and supposed alien intelligences, there is a telepathic connection. That's a major theme in whether it's, they actually say there's some kind of contact with an entity, but even just people that are observing craft, a lot of times they're saying that they had some kind of like instant download. And so I think that is making that community more interested. And then I'd like to also think that the efforts that we've been doing at IRVA, and not just IRVA, there's so many other groups right now. I mean, you guys have your show, Daz Smith and the Future Forecasters, Courtney Brown. There's a lot of remote viewing groups that are doing a lot with remote viewing different UAP type projects. And, maybe that really deserves, maybe I should have said that first, because, we're tuning into these topics using remote viewing, and then the people involved in that, sometimes it's the same people, that they're interested in both topics, but they're starting to see that remote viewing can have real can produce information that's useful for what they're researching. So there is a big connection there.
Yeah, I think that if we you know, the more that we show our work, meaning that we have successful sessions and we publicize them on these tools like the shows or on Facebook, document things, make little YouTube videos of our successes. And, you know, I'm talking about not only disclosure, but if we're looking at cold cases, true crime cases, things where you're helping detectives find, the more that we can put that out there, it becomes more, moves more in the mainstream world. It becomes desensitized. They become desensitized to it being something wacky, and it becomes more seen. And that's when we start building that credibility around these cases. Then we can start looking at disclosure, and then people will also, you know, the problem with disclosure and those kinds of esoteric targets, although there's so much fun for us to do, is that we, you know, if we want to go mainstream, the people are not, you know, they're not going to really, they're going to have an issue with it because we don't have concrete evidence. And so they can just fall back on, oh, they're just woo-woo people, and, you know, this psychic bogus and things like that. So, so I think like our way up is to just have, you know, I definitely think we should be looking at both, of course, but I think it's like a slow build up where if we keep putting it out there, we keep, you know, working really hard, as we have to do as remote viewers or psychics, we have to work even harder to show how clean our work is, you know, blind targets and things like that. We all know that you don't necessarily, like, you can have front loading and be successful. But if we want to kind of move into the mainstream world, we have to kind of go overboard to show them that we're keeping things clean.
Yeah, these are great points. Sasha, did you have a question or a comment?
I was going to say something, but I just lost it. I was going to ask about suppression in RV. But first, I do want to say, Michelle, I do agree with you that we have to maintain a higher standard. You know, it's in the same way that if you're a politician or a public figure, you have to maintain a higher standard of morality because you're under scrutiny. I think the same applies to remote viewers. You know, front-loaded work, unverifiable, and, you know, even to your point, Debra, about people who are in proximity to UFOs, UAPs, maybe they have telepathic communications, but because it's not verifiable, and because I think the standard of skill for remote viewing isn't well established, that you have very diverse levels of skill and ability, you do have a lot of people coming out with what the aliens told them, and you can't verify it. And then people have a following, not necessarily because the aliens did tell them that, but because people want to think that the aliens told them. Like, it just gets so messy. And I think it starts to erode the credibility of remote viewing. And here we all are trying so hard to build the credibility of remote viewing. Like Michelle, you said, we're showing our work. For the audience, if you're watching this on our Magic in the Noise Unlisted channel, that's our channel where we put up interviews, conversations, tips and tools about remote viewing. But we also have our main channel where we upload videos about our remote viewing results. We share our results, and that's Magic in the Noise. And so we also have a Patreon where we put up our sessions, with scans of our work, not always in the time frame that I would like us to, because I'm slow at editing and I'm slow at getting things up on the Patreon, but we do post them eventually. We do have a website where we have portfolios, and we try to upload our sessions there as well, because that's what we want to establish as a norm. If you're a remote viewer and you want to do public work, private work, client work, if you want to speak with any kind of authority in the community about remote viewing, show me your work. Let me know that it's not front-loaded. Let me know that it's blind. If it's not blind, that's fine, but tell me it's not blind, and then I can interpret it how I want to.
Right.
Whether I look at it as entertainment, as remote viewing entertainment, that's fine. There's value in that as well. But if it's not blind, then I don't attribute the same weight to the data that you've collected. And so I want to know if it's blind or not. I want to know if it's mid-loaded as well, because again, it doesn't mean that I don't want to see your work if it's mid-loaded. It just means that I'm going to look at it through a different lens, and that's okay too, right? And so I feel very passionately about this, and that's part of what I think David and I are trying to do here. Is we share our results. We want to be more open, because I think that's a standard we need to establish. Show me your portfolio before you tell me all these things that remote viewing has revealed to you. Okay, but like if you're not necessarily a strong remote viewer, I have to know that to take it with a grain of salt, because like you said, psychic experiences, remote viewing, there are more people coming into the remote viewing community. And Debra, I think you're right. People are looking to monetize UAPs, UFOs, and remote viewing is the new buzzword, and it's the new trending topic, like David was saying, right? It's on Joe Rogan, it's in the congressional hearings. And so we are going to see a flood of new people that are looking at this as a target community for selling their product, their digital content, whatever it is. So I think the more we can establish what we accept, what we take on faith, the better it'll be in the long run for the credibility. I wanted to ask a little bit, David, you can maybe refine my question, but about suppression in remote viewing, because Debra, you brought up the fact that some instructors were angry with IRVA's research unit for daring to suggest that that there are variable levels of skill, that remote viewers can tell when they get good data, which means that there's a difference between good data and noise. And some remote, some trainers, maybe that threatens them because maybe the system that they're teaching produces more noise than signal, right? There are all these kind of complicated things. There's ego involved. There's money on the line for some of these instructors. There's reputational issues. So it's very complex.
It is. And, one of the things is there is a difference between brand new students, brand new remote viewers, and those that have been remote viewing for years. There's definitely crossover, and absolutely even the most experienced remote viewers don't always know when they're right, if their data is good or not. But I had started to notice myself over the last couple of years that there are moments in my sessions where I would almost bet my life that something I'm getting is going to turn out to be right or partially right. There's something there. And, for me, it's something that repeats. Like I get it, I set it aside, I kind of forget about it, and it emerges again. So there's some, different clues. And then that's why when we went to our research meeting, we had to talk about this. And I was like, hey, how many other people here feel that? And it was split. Half of the people were like, yeah, when I think I'm right, I'm not. When I think I'm wrong, I am. But other people were like, yeah, I'm starting to notice. So it's what you might experience when you first start off. And even I totally get it that if you start off and you're holding in your mind oh, I need to be right. And if I'm not sure, then I'm not going to report this, or I'm not going to put it down. Or, students do that all the time, and it screws up their whole session. And for a beginning teacher, what you need to do most is help them to see don't worry about if you're right or wrong, get everything on your paper and be focused on what you're observing and experiencing, and not on your own performance. So I totally get that's essential. But there does come a point where, if part of the problem for project managers, say, and Michelle, you were talking about crime solving cases. I know you're working on a cold case right now, and you have multiple viewers. And I would be very surprised if you didn't have, you've got all your transcripts and there's probably some contradictory data in there. You've probably got some viewers saying one thing and then some viewers saying something else, or maybe just one viewer has some data that is well, no one else got this. Do I pay attention to this or not? this is a problem, because there is almost always some incorrect data in many sessions. And if remote viewers, managers, teachers want to pretend that's not the case, that it's just not true. It's, there's always almost some amount of wrong data. So how can we fix that? And how can we analyze it and sort through it? There's lots of different possible ways, but one would be if a viewer could say, I'm pretty confident about this. Now, we still wouldn't want our data to be ignored if we're not confident, but we're just looking for some extra clues. And this is something parapsychologists, like, over the years have tried to study. It's like not that much, but I did find, when I did a literature review, I did find that this is a valid question in like dream ESP research or the Gansfeld research. And it's called confidence calls. Like, can viewers call, like, how correct they're going to be? And there is evidence that yes, they can, to an extent. And there's another group that just won a BL grant too, is the University of Virginia Department of Perceptual Studies researchers, and they're doing brain research using EEG machines, and then also this procedure called microphenomenology, where they very, in a detailed manner, interview people about when they got something right and when they got something wrong. And they're trying to understand the same thing both through the EEG technology and also through interviewing the remote viewer and finding out, what were they thinking? What were they doing with their bodies? What were they feeling, both when they got a correct piece of data and also when they got an incorrect piece of data. And I worked with them for 3 days. About 6 months ago, I went to their lab and they did like a pre-test, and now they're reaching out to more viewers, and they're going to be maybe testing about 10 viewers over the next year to try to really, get some answers with this topic.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. For me, I always feel like the remote viewing field is not pushed fast enough, far enough. And part of it is kind of what you said. You see sort of the general cycle of humanity. The older crowd kind of suppresses the new crowd comes in, they're like, yeah, they got all these innovative ideas, and the old crowd's like, no. And then eventually the old crowd kind of fades away, and the new crowd gets enough power or popularity or whatever, and their innovation gets kind of injected in. Right. And so I see that piece as well. But then also I see, like, in the declassified documents, the NSA saying things like, we really don't want people to have this power in the civilian sector. So I feel like there's also some drag that's put on the whole thing from that perspective. But it's good to hear that you're moving in this direction with these things, because I think it's very important to innovate and think about these aspects and try to improve it. One of the things I wanted to ask, because I think we're running out of time, but Michelle, so you're a producer. Like, I've not ever talked to a producer, right? I'm like an engineer, and I'm really curious about like everything. I want to know like all the details about everything. So like, an opportunity to talk to you as a producer. You've worked with Art Bell and Jimmy Church, and you co-produced on a bunch of other things. Like, I'm going to look at my notes because it's just Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, as an example. So my question is, like, as a producer, is there anything different that you have to do with content that is paranormal, supernatural, psychic, versus maybe normal content? Like, are there any challenges or differences with that approach?
Well, most of the people, in the Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot, we sat down and discussed. So as a producer, my job is to present a marketing campaign around the demographic of who we want to reach. And so in our meetings, we talked about how they really want to move mainstream, which I'm finding that a lot of these filmmakers are going down that track too. So when we do that, we have a lot of discussions about, it has to be a slow process to almost like kind of, dip your toe in. You don't want to like put it all out there at once. So if you see the film, you'll see that we have, Dr. Simeon Hine. He has one of the best segments I love, because what he does is he takes real world examples that are already happening with animals, and he talks about what's the name, the cutterfish or some
Yeah,
cuttlefish.
cuttlefish. Yeah.
Cuttlefish.
Yeah.
And what we know about the cuttlefish is that it mesmerizes its prey because it can change colors and it can cloak itself in a way. And so if we already know that there are animals on this planet that can cloak themselves, he uses that example to say, well, why not if there is a Bigfoot? So I think like having that logic mixed in with the possible illogical, I don't know how to say that, idea is a way to kind of push that out there in that area. In terms of Jimmy, he just leans into the parent. He's not trying to be mainstream at all. His mission is to give space to people to tell their story, and then allow an audience to listen and make their own decision. And that's really, Art Bell paved the way for that. He was one of the first. A lot of people will refer to him as like the Johnny Carson of late night talk shows. He would give people, whether there were some things that he didn't believe in, but he would let the people get up there, tell their story, and then just go, okay, my job is an interviewer, and just to ask the questions that the listeners want to hear. Am I keeping you up, Debs? I don't know. Am I so boring? No, I know she had a big day.
This is my third interview today. Sorry.
We are an hour in, so we can wrap it up a little bit. So maybe it's all good.
I'm happy to be here.
One last question that we could maybe cover is, because it's something that I think is influencing the community a lot. I think it's something that's buzzing, and I think it's something that does actually deserve more consideration. I think people are jumping into it with excitement without necessarily taking everything into consideration. And that's the role of AI and pulling AI into remote viewing, or pulling remote viewing into AI. And so, David, I want to hear as well your piece on it. And I have some thoughts, but I'd like to start with you, Michelle and Debra. Well, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah.
You go.
Well, one of IRVA's board members, Cindy Miller, has a PhD in mathematics, and she's been extensively studying AI and then holding some classes, and I learned a lot from her. So I've been using like ChatGPT for just about everything. And I just used it for the study I was talking about with do viewers know when they're on target. I ran the stats through. I ran we did everything without it first, but then I took like our thematic analysis and ran that through to double check it. I took all the stats that our SurveyMonkey program came up with and ran that through that as well and checked it all. We've been playing around. Cindy did a demonstration kind of mini experiment where we got together and she gave me a target, and she had AI monitor me as I did the target, and the AI had to learn how to do it, because at first it was like too much front loading me or just giving me a lot of noise. But then we would say, no, don't lead the viewer, don't make suggestions, because the AI was like, do you see a car? Do you see a bird? Do you see? And I was like, no, don't say that. That's going to get in my way. But then it like improved on it. So part of the studies actually that we got the BL grant for is a collection of studies that are using, they're all designed around AI or virtual reality. We're going to be doing an experiment where we have virtual reality glasses and environments, and we want to see how remote viewers respond to that when they have that as a target. And yeah, and then we're also using AI for target creation, for scoring, things like that. So yeah, it's just so I'm totally obsessed with it because it's just so easy to use. And also it seems to really know a lot about remote viewing. Like, have you guys been using ChatGPT or anything? If you just like put in any question about remote viewing, like I've noticed a change over in the last couple of months. Like 2 months ago, like you did get some responses that made sense, but now it's like so knowledgeable about remote viewing. It's really crazy. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll let Michelle. I'm interested in your point of view as well.
So, I have. Are you guys familiar with Tom Campbell?
Yeah.
Okay, so like back in the day, I don't know, he's sort of coming back again, but before there was AI, he would talk about the simulation theory. And so it's kind of interesting that he, that this is kind of happening. It's kind of like this combination of like, oh, this is happening, because when he first came out, like we're all living in a simulation. And he would talk about, it was just so foreign to people. People were like, it was just a brand new concept. Now with the AI, it's the same thing. It's such a foreign thing, and people are trying to find its place and this balance between it because, I don't want to replace humans. And I'm not talking about, what Terminator. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about creativity and, the essence of who we are that a computer or AI can't emulate. And so it is a good tool, but I just want to make sure that people don't rely on it too much. And I really try not to I have used it in some things, but I try not to depend on it because I know my brother is obsessed with it. He uses it for everything. And one day I said to him, like, what happens if like somehow that goes away? What are you going to do? So like, don't depend on it at all. Like keep, challenging yourself to build up your vocabulary and build up ways to say things and just use it as either a safety net or a crutch or a tool that can enhance you instead of it the other way around. So that's my piece, and I'm sticking to it.
David, what do you think?
Well, first, I'm very pro AI, so in the future when Skynet takes over, they know I'm a friendly companion, and I'm left alone. But AI is very powerful. It's amazing. In terms of, so I think that it can be leveraged with remote viewing, but it has to be retooled in order for it to specifically help with certain kinds of things. Kind of like what Debra says in terms of training it with the monitoring, but I think about it a little bit beyond that. Like the current models probably won't work with psychic ability in an optimized way. However, I think there are a lot of people who just assume when they don't really know what it does or how it works that it absolutely will work. And this is where I kind of have an issue with it because large language models have a very tiny buffer in terms of their ability to remember anything. And also, they always want to give you, like, they're programmed to give you an answer. They can never just say, like, I don't know, or it's like they're trying really hard to come up with some kind of piece of information that's useful, which means they can lie or they can exaggerate because it's just part of the way that they're designed. So, like, if you don't really understand this and you kind of come into it with certain expectations, like the wrong assumptions, then your output that you get from it may not align with reality, and then you miscalculate, what it's actually doing for you. But having said that, they actually can, do very good things for you. So I'm saying, like, you have to have this kind of like more balanced sort of approach and a broader perspective about how the actual individual tool that you're working with actually is constructed, so you understand its blind spots and things of that nature. That's just my personal opinion. What about you, Sasha?
So I think I side more with Michelle on this one. I do think there are two main concerns that I have. One, if we become over-reliant on especially things like ChatGPT, then we're vulnerable and susceptible to agendas being inserted by those who control what answers are acceptable for ChatGPT to provide. And we've already seen that being an issue where, people were asking AI, give me an oil painting of the founders. And it was, not at all representative of the founders of the United States, right? And so I think that you can put into ChatGPT and other kind of AI technology limits, parameters. You can exclude things so it's completely blind to the existence of certain concepts or certain truths. You can bias it so the things that have not yet been established as truth are provided as truth. And so that's my main concern, because then if your ChatGPT is acting as your monitor, for example, right now it's neutral. It hasn't really been necessarily interfered with for that kind of a task. But at some point, any military who has control over the AI that you're using could decide that maybe they want specific questions to go in a certain way. They want to move you away from certain topics, or they want to move you towards certain topics. And so I'm very concerned about that. I also think that, that's something that David said. A lot of people don't understand what it is that AI is doing. They really do think I'm interacting with something intelligent and it's thinking of a response. It's thinking about the meaning of my question. In fact, it's not. It's just matching with what's the most common next word that comes after the word that you provided. So you provide a string of words, it looks at the string and it says, what are the most common chunks of text that I can find in my learning database that will map onto that? And so I think that, when people first started using AI for remote viewing, we saw a lot of people that were doing a monitored session, and then at the end they would say, now give me the reveal. And of course, ChatGPT hasn't chosen a target in the past and then monitored you and then is now giving. No, it's just answering your question. So you say, okay, well, now give me the target reveal. It looks at the data that you provided. It looks at the answers that you gave to its question. And then it comes up with the closest match. So everyone was getting all these hits. I'm the best remote viewer in the world because when I do remote view on ChatGPT, I always get a hit. Well, no, it's because it was matching the target reveal to the data that you had provided. And I think people didn't understand that at first. And so now the community understands that. I think it's been explained in different places. And so people have that. But I worry that that's the problem with using new tech, is that very often we don't necessarily understand the complexity of the new technology. And so we still have to adopt new technology in order to stay up to date and current. But I think it's to do it a little bit cautiously. Deborah, yes, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I found some examples of what I was just using it for, and I was sharing it with my research team, and I got very excited. So this is, and what you're saying makes total sense. Like there are so many errors that can happen. But here's some examples. I wrote to ChatGPT and I said, hi, I don't know why I say hi to it, but hi, I have
thank you too.
Yes,
thank you.
Yes. Isn't that weird? Do you have that? Like, I feel like I need to say thank you, please, stuff like that. It's crazy. But I said, hi, I have 10 remote viewing targets and I'd like to randomize them and create longitude and latitude coordinates for them. Can you help me out? And then it said yes. And then I said, will you generate 10 targets that are as different from each other as possible? These should be all locations that are equally interesting, but very different in color, shape, size, character, and meaning. Once you create them, attach a target number to each one, and then present them to me in random order. And then it did it in 1 second. Here are 10 remote viewing targets equally different from each other. And then I said, can you send me the picture for all of these in a single folder or links to these? And it did. It gave me like 10 different targets with their longitude, latitude coordinates. And then I said, now create 20 numbers, all 8 digits ending in a sequential chronological order. Then put dates on them with the idea that the remote viewers will receive one every month, starting this month, and go for 12 months. And so it gave me all those numbers. And then I'll just give you one more example.
You're so bossy.
Because we're trying to design a study, and there's all these numbers we have to come up with. So then the final thing I'll say is, I asked it. I said, well, what if we wanted to have just 20 trials? How many this was asking about assessing, because we wanted to know. I said, if I'm trying to do a remote viewing experiment with sets of decoy photos to try to match the viewer's transcript with the best matching photo, and I only want to do 10 trials, how large does the set have to be as far as number of decoy photos? And then it did all the calculations, and then I was like, well, what if I only want to have 5 viewers, or what if I want to have 10 viewers and less trials? How can we determine statistical significance? So these are all things that we're meeting as a group to figure stuff out with. And, this did this all in this conversation in 5 minutes, which might have taken us hours to work out. So those
are good examples. Yeah, those are really good examples. I think those are really good use of the AI ChatGPT type of programs or software, definitely. And like you said, if you want to know, in order to have a statistically significant result, what effect size, and this is the effect size that I want, how many data points do I need, that kind of thing. So I agree. I think that those are good examples. Elizabeth says in chat, I watched an interview with a guy and ChatGPT lied more than once on the most simple things. So agree with David, ChatGPT even admitted to being a liar. And that's the thing, it will just give information. It doesn't understand truth versus fiction because it doesn't have a mechanism to understand. It's not a mind that's thinking. It's just a program that matches patterns. David?
Well, I was just saying, but the good news is you can program that in. You can fix those things right through subsequent iterations if this is your focal. So, but yes, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating topic, and I've used it as well. Like Deborah's saying, it's like I've been doing all sorts of programming with it. I'm like, hey, can you maybe just write a program for me to do this thing or that thing, and it just spits it out, and I'm like, okay, that just saved me like an hour of programming, right? So it's amazing.
Yes. So I think, well, there are strengths and there are drawbacks, and I think that the important thing, I think at least for me, is keep having the conversation. We need to keep re-examining our underlying assumptions. When it first came out, everyone assumed it was telling the truth. Now we know that's not the case. And so it doesn't mean we throw it out. It means we say, okay, so then how do we mitigate? And how do we take that into account? What are the different kinds of questions we are going to ask it, because we know it can't guarantee truth, right? And so, yeah, so I think it's good. I think it's good that people are thinking about these things, talking about these things, and I appreciate your opinions on these things. Before we go, any comments or questions or last kind of things you guys wanted to talk about? Or David, did you have anything you wanted to bring up?
No, I really appreciated being able to talk with Michelle and Debra. I think it was wonderful. I don't have anything specific.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having us on, and maybe you can come and join us on our new show, the Side Chicks Talk Show on YouTube. It would be really fun to have you join us.
And we're going to be live at the Conscious Life Expo in February. I think it's February. Is it February 7th?
Yeah, we'll have a live podcast with our show, and then also the International Remote Viewing Association is going to have a booth there where we're just inviting people to come and say hi, and we're going to have some different contests, like guess what's in a box and find an object that's hidden somewhere. So then we'll talk more about that on our podcast on that day too. So, and Michelle will be there, and some people, I guess no one here I saw some people in the chat. I see Elizabeth here. She's the director of education for IRVA and has been helping us get ready for that event too. But nice to see Elizabeth here, and nice to see Carl. Carl's a really talented remote viewer who's going to be coming to the United States to offer some traveling workshops, and just looking to see. I see Sarah here. Hi there.
You kind of look like Romper Room right now.
Boys and girls of the world with their smiling, beautiful faces. Hi.
And
boys
well,
and girls.
I did want to say, I've been sick this week, and so I'm just keeping it together. But so I overlooked putting the link to your channel, the Side Chicks Talk Show, in the description box. But I will do that immediately after we go out there. Here, I'll add that in. And so for the audience, so the Side Chicks Talk Show, it's Michelle and Debra, and they talk about all kinds of topics related to psychic stuff, and it's fun. And it's new, so you can go check that out. And like I said, I'll put the link down below shortly. Of course.
Thanks for having us. It was so much fun. So much fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. It was good.
Very cool.
These conversations are good to have, and sometimes they're hard to have on text. So like if you're talking on Facebook, it's nice to have the face and to have the spontaneity. So we're really grateful for your joining us here tonight. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for your questions in the chat. And we look forward to sitting down with you again, maybe on your channel, maybe next time on ours. And David, thank you so much for coming up with good questions today. Appreciated that.
Yep.
Yeah. And so any last words, anyone, before I turn it off? No. So thank you to the audience as well. We appreciate you supporting our channel and supporting what we're trying to do here, which is just opening up the conversation. And so good night, everyone.
Bye.
Night.